With that said, we're going to start the afternoon with a good friend of mine. He does so much good for the ABC with his retired fighters charity. You guys have seen this stuff on the website. He's done the auction. We've done the casino night. The good that John does with the funds that we create out of this organization is unbelievable. So I'm happy to introduce John, and he's going to tell you guys a little bit more about what's going on. So John English from New Hampshire.
That cost me money. Good to see everyone. It's great to be back. It's been a long 18 months. Obviously last year we didn't have the convention. As many of you know, I'm the chairman of the Retired Fighters Charity. In the past, what we've done is during this convention is kind of our biggest fundraising time. We've done the casino nights in the past. We've always done a great job with that. And then we're able to distribute those funds over the course of the year until the next convention. We do have some vendors that are on a reoccurring donation schedule. If any of you haven't seen it, I encourage you to go to the ABC website, abcboxing.com, click on Fighter Fund, scroll all the way down the bottom, and you'll see that there's opportunities for people to donate. If you're a commissioner and you know of a fighter who is in need, or like Greg was saying earlier, you're stepping these guys down, and it gets to the point where you have that conversation because they're just either mentally or physically not there anymore and they need to retire. As a commissioner, it's a great idea for you to encourage them to visit that site. And then what happens is an application online. They fill out the application, it comes to the committee, we review it to make sure it's eligible, and then from there we vote on it, and then we distribute the funds. As many of you know, we do not distribute funds directly to athletes, we distribute them to debtors. I will go through my presentation here just to get the body up to speed on the transparency of what we've been doing from 2019 to today, where the funds went, how much it was. I'll answer any questions about what we're doing, and I have a special guest to do another presentation. We can talk about that as soon as I'm done. So we'll get right into it here. Going to the first slide here. On August of 2019, it was $600 that went to Mark Kerr's landlord. We had paid a few months rent for Mark because he was literally disabled. He wasn't able to work. He was in an extreme amount of pain, going through a lot from, obviously his career and the injuries he's suffered. I don't know if any of you heard, but Mark was actually in Arizona, which was great. He actually came and he spoke. And from what I understand, I guess they inked a deal where they're going to make a movie on him, his life story. Supposedly, Dwayne Johnson is tailored to play him. But again, I think COVID screwed that all up. I've been in contact with Mark a little bit. He's doing much better, and he's obviously very thankful for everything we did for him. Next one. That's all right. So Dan Bonnell is a New England athlete. He retired. He had a little over 20 fights. Dan's a great guy. I'm a New England guy too. I mean, I've crossed paths with Dan over the years. A lot of knee injuries, and Dan mental health has actually been a huge problem for him, and he needed some help to get caught up on bills. His car was going to get repossessed, and so he put an application in, and we gifted him that amount of money. Many of you probably have heard this story of David. Actually, David Whitcomb is the son. We donated $5,000. He died after he was 10 months in a coma, and they finally had to pull the plug. And the Canadian Commission approached us about doing something to help David, his son. And what we did is we gifted $5,000 to be distributed to the estate of the son when he comes to age. And so the Canadian Commission helped us out tremendously with that resource and that connection. That was a tough one. That was a tough one. Finally here, $5,000 check to a nursing home, another boxer, Livingstone Bramble. He was in a care facility and he was running out of money. and they were going to have to let him go. He needed full-time care, and so we came along and we helped pay that bill for him. So we had 2 applications in the 4th quarter of 2020 that were denied due to ineligibility. We had 1 application that we did approve. They ended up unclaiming it, and so we just removed the application from there, and we were done. And right now, that is the remaining balance that we have in the Retired Fighters Charity account. Any questions so far? That's a great question. I don't recall. I believe it was a few months. I think it was like maybe 2 months to help him out so he could stay in there. And anyone, if you want any of this information, I can go back into my records. I wanted to kind of just give you a brief overview of what we did, but I am more than happy to get more detailed information if anyone requests that. So just feel free to either see me personally or you can email me as well. Any other questions? So what's the future? Doctor, yeah.
I guess the question I have, I was trying to do this as the head of the Ringside Physicians Association for 15 years, but how come we can't, I know some states can't do this because of legislation, but how come as part of any card, the promoter can come up with $250 that's sent to this, it's a donation, they can write it off, and the amount of shows that take place in this country would need to take place, this thing would be funded.
Absolutely. We're thinking on the same lines, and that's what I want to get into right now. Back in 2019 in Arizona, I threw out a seed, an idea. As the ABC, what are we good at? What's our gift? As an organization, what's our strength? It's a question. What's that? Protecting fighters, fighter safety. What else are we really good at? Come on, what are we good at? Integrity of the sport, rulemaking. We're at the top of we are the gold standard in the entire world when it comes to the sports of combat sports. Between rulemaking, between medicals, and then we all get together and we work together as a team and we help to try to further these sports to protect the athletes, to keep the integrity of the contest there. That's what we're really good at. That's what we do. Here's what we're really not good at as a 501(c) in a nonprofit. It's really hard to raise money because now we can get into situations where we're having a conflict of interest, where if we start attaching our wagon to certain organizations because they're giving us money, even though the money is going to a really good cause, it can put us in a really tough position. So in 2019 in Arizona, I floated an idea of some sort of putting it back on the states, putting on the states individually to help raise money through whether, I don't care if it's a licensing fee, if it's a percentage of the gate, it doesn't really matter what it is. And what we do is that money is for that state, obviously. But what we can do as the ABC is we can kind of be the traffic director where people fill out the applications on our website and we're pointing them and linking directly to these states for them to fill out these applications and then go for some sort of grant or gift that they need based on what's happened. So what I've done over the course of the last year is not just to have this idea, but say who's already done this in the states and how can we use that as a template to help all of you to try to implement this in your state. And listen, I'm not naive. I get how democracy works and the wheels of progress are very, very slow. I get it. And I understand that legislature has to be written and it could take years for a state to try to adopt something where you're getting this type of fund in an account for local athletes within your state. So I'm going to introduce now Bryan Lambert. He's out of the Mass State Commission. They have this in place already. So does California. I did a poll a few months ago to the body, and I wanted to see how many states are actually doing something like this now, and I got 2 responses, Massachusetts and California. We have a president, Bryan has a presentation for you. He's going to go through how this is going to work. And listen, this is the first step to a long journey, but I truly believe in my heart, if we can all do this, we can absolutely, like Doc said, we can absolutely get a lot of money to help a lot more athletes than what we've been doing, and take the fundraising off the ABC and let us focus on what we do best. So I'm going to turn it over to Bryan, and then any other questions at the end, I'll be back. Thank you.
Thanks, John.
He probably doesn't need to apple break anymore. He can move it.
What's that?
He probably doesn't need apple break forever standing on that.
Yeah. I need this to be a little taller is what I need to be here, so.
Right below.
No, that's fine. Can you guys hear me okay? Yeah, okay. So Bryan Lambert, Mass State Athletic Commission. One thing that Massachusetts is pretty good at is writing rules and laws, and getting those on the books. So I'm going to walk through quickly, pretty informally here, what we've done in Massachusetts. We have what we call a boxers fund, and that was a great question. I don't know who asked that about why can't states contribute some money, or why can't promoters contribute some money. So we're going to get to that a little bit. So created for the exact stuff we're talking about here. So created in the 1960s originally, the Boxers Fund is meant to help with medical household expenses. I know California is one of the other states that has some laws on the books that dictates something similar, but I believe theirs is more of a pension fund where you fight and now you're a certain amount of time, certain amount of fights, and now you're owed this money, as a traditional kind of pension retirement fund. This is more of a hardship fund. So folks, fighters that are down and out, have had either some, physical issues or mental health issues or drug abuse issues, all the things that we see with fighters that have just had kind of a tough go beyond or even during their fighting years. So originally created in 1960, in 2010, there was a big update to the law, which I'll talk about a little bit. You can see here family members of deceased fighters can also, put in an application for funeral expenses. Currently, we have about $135,000 available in the fund. I'll talk a little bit more about that coming up here as well. But what happened in 2010 was interesting, and we can actually go to this slide here. So prior to 2010, what you're seeing here on the screen and what you're seeing on slide 3 of the handout that you have, this is how the law is currently written. This was all updated in 2010. Prior to 2010, the Boxers Fund was in existence. Money was being given out. It was given out only to boxers at that time. Part of the 2010 update allowed for kickboxing, MMA, other combat sports. But there was a lack of kind of transparency in the money going out the door. So what happened in 2010 was this update. 1% of gross receipts from the sale of tickets and admission fees is what goes into the fund. So that's to your point where this was written into law. It's dictated. Promoters have to contribute 1% from every event into the fund. Okay, so it's right there. It's got a revenue generating source that's on the books, designed specifically to help fighters. You can see at the bottom, so the Mass General Law, which is the MGL, is the top one, and there's a link there to that, just to give you some thoughts about maybe what you can do in your state. But then the CMR, which is underneath the MGL in our state, that just dictates that us, as the commission, we have the ability to distribute those funds. One thing we're working on right now that's an interesting change, this was done in 2010. You can see this last line that's bolded in the first section where it says, an injury suffered while participating in an event. Just some feedback on that. We're trying to change that to from participating in an event. There was a period of time where there was almost an overcorrection from money going out the door without a lot of accountability, or at least a lot of documentation. And when they wrote this, think about all the stuff that we know now about, concussions, mental health, that we knew about in 2010 but didn't get the same type of emphasis. So, fighters that might suffer the effects of fighting 20 years after they're retired, 10 years after they're retired, where it was a little too hard to get the money out the door when it says while participating, an injury that you occurred that night. They were taking the law a little too literally. So we've gotten some advice from our legal counsel that we can kind of expand that a little bit now, but there was a period in time where I think they were taking that definition a little too literally when approving money going out the door. So that's how the law is actually written. You know, who's eligible in Massachusetts? It's, you know, anyone who's fought. There's no number of fights. There's no years fighting. It's just, did you fight in the state in an event that was regulated, you know, by the state commission? If you did, and you fit the definition of being in need, have you suffered a financial hardship due to an injury? You can apply. You have to be a Massachusetts resident, so I think this is where John is kind of looking at our example as, you know, can the states be more involved in supporting their local fighters? You know, people that live in your state, people that have fought in your state, you know, can you help them a little bit more? So you can see this right here, the language that's outlined. You know, have you fought in the state? Do you live in the state? You know, have you suffered an injury? Have you suffered a financial hardship? And you can only receive money every 6 months from the fund. Application process, so we actually used COVID, which was a pretty quiet time in our state, to update the application. This was a point of emphasis for us. So in 2021, we did 2 things. We formed kind of a subcommittee that's attached to our state athletic commission. Their sole purpose is to deal with applications, to help promote the fund, and we redid the application. So if anyone's interested, I know John has this. It's available on the Massachusetts State Gov website. You can find the Boxers Fund application pretty easily, but you know, a template that we just updated in 2021. So this is the process that a fighter would have to go through, which I'll talk about coming up here in a couple slides. You know, written documentation, suffered, you know, that you suffered an injury, obviously proof that you fought in Massachusetts, what was the physical, psychological, neurological damage, and then the third bullet point there, proof of financial hardship. I think this is where I'm seeing some difficulty. You know, we're struggling with 2 things in Massachusetts, as great as it is that we have this on the books, kind of awareness of the fund, you know, getting it out to the community. But also sometimes the people that are in the most need are also the ones that struggle the most to probably produce, you know, the backup to show that they're in the need. You know, the people in the community know that they're in need. People that know them know that they're in need. But, you know, through our process, some documentation, whether it's bills, hospital bills, things like that, you know, we've seen that they're struggling to produce that actual documentation that is needed to get money out the door to them. One thing that we changed here with the application, as well as in that bullet point 3, just, you know, so to that point, or, you know, as well as by oral testimony. So if we can actually talk to the person, we'll accept that in the place of them submitting documentation, trying to get around that as well. So that's the application process. Distribution of funds, I think similar to the Fighters Fund, you know, we're trying to get the money to the actual place where it's owed, whether that's a landlord, a mortgage payment, you know, to pay the medical provider. That's what we see a lot of, you know, people that just can't pay medical bills, trying to get that directly to the right place. You know, if they can show proof that they, you know, have spent some money, we will reimburse them. So they can get reimbursed directly if they can show, A, I'm in financial hardship, but I did, you know, pay my rent the last 2 months, but now I'm struggling. I need, you know, some reimbursement might be needed there. So we would pay it directly to them in that situation. And again, put a link there. You guys all have the presentation, but this is the actual language in our regs if you're looking for some guidance as to what you can do in your state. And then last slide, and, you know, please jump in with any questions here. So these are the challenges and some current initiatives that we're seeing here in the state of Mass. So just a lack of community awareness. You know, we had an MMA promoter in Mass who's one of our more active promoters, puts on great shows, been doing it for 10 plus years. He was unaware until recently that the Boxer Fund even existed. So that's, you know, that's on us, that's not on him, that's not on the community. So a point of emphasis right now is to really just, you know, promote this better in the community, whether it's promoting it through the ABC, you know, nationally, but also promoting it locally through gyms, fighters, whoever we can get the word out to. And then again, I touched on number 2. Sometimes the fighters that are in the most need are the ones that just struggle the most to complete the application process. So trying to be more aware of that, which is why we formed the subcommittee, so we can be a little bit more involved in the application process. Some hesitancy, some people just don't want to raise their hand and say that they're struggling. So I think the better we promote it, the easier it'll be for people to come forward. And then again, I mentioned that, while participating to, from participating. So that's it. Happy to answer any questions. It's a good thing in Massachusetts, trying to get more money out the door. That's our biggest struggle.
How often are they eligible to get it?
So every 6 months they can tap into it. So the two restrictions on money coming out. So us as the board, as the commission, we've got a lot of once the application's in, if the person qualifies, we can dictate how much money that person gets, up to 5% of whatever is in the fund. So that's actually in the law as well. The maximum we can give to any one fighter in a 6-month period is 5% of whatever's in the fund. So it does handcuff us a little bit if someone was really in need with some big bills that we wanted to help them, but that's how it's written. Yeah.
You also mentioned that missing like luxury, how about if they have a luxury car or a luxury house or something in that form?
Yeah, I haven't seen. I know that's like in the law. I forget the exact wording there, but I haven't seen that in the last 4 years. I haven't seen that come up where we had to really think about, hey, this is a luxury expense. But I mean, things like car payments, housing payments, stuff like that. Try to help the best we can and not be too critical of, well, should you really be paying for that car? Should you really have that type of cell phone, stuff like that? If they're in need and we can help them, we're trying to, the community pays into the fund, so we're trying to do the best we can to get the money out the door back to the community. Anything else?
Isn't the American, the ARPA funds, as far as rental assistance, isn't that something that you could share with the people who are, boxers who are behind on their rent? I think there's a rental assistance program associated with the American Rescue Plan.
Yeah, no, there is. Unfortunately, since that has been passed, actually, we didn't see, and this is where number 1 right here, that's why it's listed as number 1. That's kind of top of my mind. Lack of community awareness. We did not get one application in 2020 into the Boxers Fund. So we didn't have a situation where someone was asking for rent and we could give them some money, but also send them to that, which is newer. So lack of community awareness is a real issue for us. We're trying to promote it a lot better. And I think, again, what I referenced where we're trying to change the language, there was a period in time where the commissioners prior to myself were being very strict with, did you suffer this injury, while participating, not from participation. So, there was a period where money just wasn't going out the door. Anything else? Good. John, anything you want to say? Yeah, thanks. All right.
Thanks,
happy to take any other questions later. Thanks.
So again, a template is in place, and again, I understand this is a tremendous amount of work. When you have to write a bill, it has to go through legislature, and it could take a long time. And it's also knowing the right people to try to get that bill in. But I mean, I'm working on it already in New Hampshire. I have the wheels turning up in New Hampshire to get this done. The great thing about it is once it's done, it's done. Once it's on the books, it's on the books. So, I mean, my goal would be when I'm here next year, I'd like, instead of 2 states, I'd like 4. I think that'd be great. I think that's a huge amount of progress. And then try to keep the wheel going every year and just get this thing to grow. Side note here, and Bryan mentioned it, I don't know, a lot of you MMA fighters, Spencer the Kingfisher, he was in the UFC for years and years. If you want, check out, it's a YouTube video, it's about 7 minutes long, called The Price of Being the King. Unbelievable. Unbelievable story. And you're just sitting there shaking your head going, this is insane. This is absolutely insane. How is a guy like this not able to actually live financially on a day-to-day basis? And again, I say it all the time at every event, as a lifelong martial artist, boxer, wrestler, I don't care what combat sport you're in, it's a brotherhood. It's a brotherhood. And we stick together, and that's why we're all doing this job, because we're definitely not doing it for the money. There's not a lot of money for us. We're doing it for a passion, a love, and to give back. I have t-shirts. Every year we try to do a different Retired Fighter Fund t-shirt. I'll have those out back. At the banquet this year, we foregoed the casino night, obviously with COVID and everything else still going on. We figured it would be better just to have everyone at the banquet. We'll auction some items off at the banquet this year, try to get a little bit more money into the account, get us through until next convention when we can start opening things back up. Any other questions from me? You guys were great. I really appreciate it. Oh, Mr. Mazzulli.
John.
Yes, sir.
Here we go. From everybody that they still can donate to our charitable fund. Nothing against anybody else's, Massachusetts, California, or anything. But if you guys have to go through the legislature and get it done, you can always donate to our charitable fund.
Absolutely.
Explain to them when you did this past training and how much we received recently from the glove auctions and everything.
So what we did during the...
John works really hard, guys. I mean, he's pretty amazing at this.
No. It's a team effort.
If you need any help, ask him.
Yeah, a team effort. That's why it's a committee. So we all work hard. Lydia works hard. Bryan does. We all do. Steve Weisfeld's unbelievable. He's a great guy too. Boxing judge. I don't know any of you guys took Steve's course. It was great. He's awesome. He does a great job. But yeah, what we did this year on Saturday and Sunday, we had 2 training sessions on Saturday and 2 on Sunday. We had a signed MMA glove. We had a signed boxing glove. We auctioned it off to the participants. And we raised $300 each day. So it was $600 that we got from those guys, and then obviously selling the t-shirts, those were going really fast, and that's just another revenue stream for us this year, along with the auction. So look forward to seeing him.
Last year in the casino night and everything, you never talked about
2019 casino night, we ended up making, it was pretty close to $8,000, and I believe one of the boxing organizations matched it. So we walked away with over 16 in 2019, which was a huge, huge blessing. It was a WBO, that's correct. So that was a really good year, and I think that helped carry us through for 2020, and to be able to give the little bit of money that we were able to give, I think was great. So again, it's always a pleasure. Thank you very much.
Okay, I just wanted to give a quick kudos to everyone who's been doing a great job not allowing fighters to compete while suspended. The numbers, I get a weekly email from BoxRec, and they say all the violations that happened and all the violations that didn't, and it's gone down dramatically. This is just the number of suspensions. They're way down as well, but that correlates with the number of events we have not had over the past 2 years. This is the suspension lengths and types. As you can see, from 2018 to 19, there's a much smaller number of different variety. More recently, there's shorter suspensions. You see a 14-day suspension. So the suspensions are being maybe more accurate to what's needed by the injured fighters. Here you can see how the violations and numbers of the suspension violations and the bout numbers correlate. And I can get you this on the paper if someone's interested in really taking a good look at it. Again, another factor could be the BoxRec, all the effort they go to let you know when a fighter's suspended. As I said, I get a weekly compliance report, as does the boxing committee. They've got the red alerts on their homepage. They'll email you if you have a guy listed on your state that's scheduled to compete. When you come on the website, when you on your homepage, you can see guys listed. This guy doesn't have a federal ID. This guy's suspended past the date of the day he's supposed to compete. This is a copy of the email at the bottom that is sent to you 1 week before you've got a guy listed that is going to box in your state. So here's an example of a homepage. You can see this promoter is in arrears. That means he hasn't paid his invoices. And it's not our responsibility, but we should try our best to help BoxRec collect. So I would say, if you can, legally, don't let these fighters that owe BoxRec money put on an event in your state. It shows, like I said, the fighters in the schedule with the missing IDs, fighters that are suspended. Anytime you haven't turned your results in, there's a note that says, hey, this is what is missing from you. This is past events and upcoming events. Lastly, of course, we all know guys that are suspended show up highlighted in yellow right on the website. So it should be easy to determine, and you guys have done a great job of it. So appreciate that. And BoxRec will go into more details on their presentation tomorrow. Does anyone have any questions about suspensions? Greg.
The suspension is unbelievable. I've been here 33 years. I've never seen it that low. That's been unbelievable. The missing IDs, guys that don't have an ID or an ID expired. We had an issue, I think the kid was in Indiana, and he didn't get ID, and he got hurt. And as the things unraveled, there's possibility of a lawsuit, because that's a federal law. The federal law says that boxer has to have an ID, and that would be a valid ID. And if you let the kid fight either without an ID and an expired ID, you are really opening yourself up to a lawsuit. And there's going to be no defense for that, because that's federal law. So when BoxRec sends you that update that says expired ID, just tell the promoter he's got to renew it. He's got to renew it. And one thing is work with each other. I had a fight Saturday. I missed it. Kid had an expired ID. I did not catch it. I caught it Friday night at the weigh-ins. He had an expired ID from Massachusetts. I emailed that guy up there. I collected the form. I copied his driver's license. I collected the money.
Not me.
And God was up there, and he redid it for me that day. So work with each other if that comes up as best you can. But expired ID and no ID is a lawsuit.
Also, you're able to, in the past, and what we're able to do too is if Greg missed that ID and he called me up and I'd be like, okay, put him on suspension right after that fight. If you definitely know it's him, and I'll issue the ID when he returns. So we've done that as well in the past, which is acceptable. But you've got to keep these federal IDs in check. It's very important.
Dr. Schwartz?
So we have numbers on, let's say I suspend somebody in Connecticut indefinitely for whatever reason. A year goes by, they don't compete. It still says, on suspension, national tough. And other jurisdictions can now allow that fighter to compete because it's been more than a year. But what percentage of them are actually calling other jurisdictions to find out why?
I think they are. Is it a problem? Because I didn't think it was. I don't look at this. If the suspension is indefinite, I'm honoring it. I don't care if it's 10 years later. I would think that's what everyone's doing.
That should be maybe something that will also be looked at to see.
I think he's more talking about, so if we have somebody on suspension and we'll never let them fight in our jurisdiction again, we have the right to do.
Sure.
But I can't keep them on national suspension for more than a year. So they're not on national suspension anymore, but they are on local suspension, which is in their file. I don't ever get commissions who call me and ask me why they're not on national suspension, you can let them fight, but they never call to find out why they're indefinitely suspended somewhere else.
You can't leave them on indefinite suspension?
And I don't remember what the case was, but it's connected with their license, that if their license is only good for a year, you can only suspend them nationally for a year. So I can't keep them on national suspension for more than a year because their license period was only a year. I can keep them on suspension for me
Sure.
forever, but I can't keep them on national suspension.
I didn't realize that was happening.
Out of Nevada.
You physically remove the suspension when their license expires?
I don't if they don't call me on it, but most of them call me on it because they know. They'll say, my 1 year is up, can you remove me nationally? And they do. But I keep them on suspension for me.
What reason are you suspending them?
Their MRI was totally
So you,
unacceptable, and we would never let them fight based on the results. Other states do allow them to fight.
oh, that's
Or
bad
they
news.
don't ask for MRIs.
Okay. Yeah, you know what, we'll make a committee and see if we can do, again, I told you we changed the federal ID form and with giving the ABC the ability to suspend. So maybe that's a way that we could suspend them in the database. Guys who just shouldn't fight, you know.
Just so that those commissions get whatever information, that's available to make an educated decision. So
Absolutely.
if you're in a state that doesn't currently require an MRI, and I have them on indefinite suspension, if you call me, I'm gonna send you that information. And with it, you might make the decision as well that this kid shouldn't fight.
Do you put the note in the boxers?
I put that indefinite medical suspension, cannot fight in Mashantucket, but I rarely, if ever, get a commission to call me
Okay.
and say why.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, that's absolutely an issue that we'll address. Yes, sir.
So I'm from Arizona. If I suspend somebody, we have Mexican fighters, Frost, they fight, they get a concussion, so we ask, hey, you know what, you should get a CT scan or something else. So it's a kind of indefinitely until they provide that, but they go back to Mexico. If they fight on a Mexican commission, does that pop up there? Or is that number of suspension only for us here?
If somebody from Mexico was to go on and check box rec, they would see the suspension. So it's up to them to make the call as to whether they're gonna let the kid fight or not. Now, his question was if they go to Arizona and they fight, and then they give them a medical suspension, 45, 60, 90 for a concussion, and then they go back down to Mexico and they fight, if the Mexican commission or the Mexican group, whatever it is, that's going to allow that fight to occur and have this kid fight, if they don't check the box rec, they don't know the kid's suspended. That was his question, and I said the only way they would know he's suspended is if they check box rec.
That's an excellent point. I'm telling you, I'm tired of that shit. If the kid fights in Pennsylvania and goes across the border to Mexico to fight, the concussion doesn't go away.
No.
That concussion's still there. That's what I said. There's a court case on that exact issue of a license that ran out. So technically, your commission, the license ran out, you have no jurisdiction. His license ran out. But his medical condition is still there. That's the difference. What we started doing, I got tired of like Philly fighters or anybody I suspended, going to Mexico, Canada, South America. If they fought, well, I had them under suspension and I found out about it through box rec, I put another 30 days under suspension. That's got to stop. The concussion and the medical condition doesn't go away just because you cross the border. That doesn't go away. That's why I think that, and even if the license runs out, you still have jurisdiction over that fight.
I think in that case, I think you've done what you need to do from a commission standpoint. Like I'll put indefinite suspensions on people, and I'll say indefinite suspension, contact commission. And 9 times out of 10 when it's contact commission, it's like Mai said, they don't bother contacting commission. How are we yelling?
So, you've done what you need to do with regards to, you know, the health and safety aspect of your commission regulating that fight and that fight. From that point, our hands are kind of tied if they go somewhere where it's an unregulated type of situation and it doesn't fall under the ABC.
Are those numbers only for ABC, or that's for everybody that uses box rec?
That's something that Marina can more than likely answer better than one of us.
Yeah, as it says on the top, US Pro Box suspension, so it's not USA.
Okay, thank you.
And like I said before, what I wanted to show on that slide is the trend. So some suspension violations are actual suspension violations. It could be that a fighter is suspended outside of your jurisdiction, or wherever. So, and it could even be that somebody is suspended, but it's it could be that someone and that someone is on a
Zoom is asking that everyone uses the microphone to talk.
commission $50 or something. So it is important to show the suspension violations, but not every suspension violation is as bad as the other one. So the main aspect there was to show the trend, and that we're doing a lot systems to inform people, and that has helped bring them down. And I think every suspension violation we can all agree on is too much. So we're all working together to get that to zero. We have been in zero there, and it's just been one or two on the occasional time. So I think what it's showing is that we all are doing what we should be doing, and it's great to have this downward trend.
Anyone else? All right. I'm going to ask Dr. Schwartz to come up here again. He's going to give us a talk about pre-fight red flags. Thanks, Dr. Schwartz.
Thank you. All right. Do you see that one?
It's on here?
Yeah.
He's texting me his comments.
Should say red flags somewhere.
Report to 2021 ABC pre-fight.
You see it?
Oh, that one? It's thinking. See a big time. Oh, it's yeah, it was a big pile. It just took a
Okay, so what we were discussing just now actually leads into this. You know, the red flags that we all should be looking at when we are creating a bout card. And whether it's boxing or MMA, there are certain things that are universal. And I wanted to go through some of those with you. Let's do next slide. One more. I think that should, okay. Oh, sorry. So I think the biggest issue that we all see and we encounter at every fight is deception. The fighters are gonna lie to us. They're gonna lie about everything and anything they can because they wanna fight, they wanna make money. And the only issue is, are we gonna catch them? And so this is really about looking for things to identify issues that are deceptive. And if we could identify them, then sometimes we could probably save some lives. So let's go to the next slide. Okay, so unfortunately, this fighter did pass away. Now go to the next slide, please. So after the fight, this comes out. Boxer Mike Towell's fatal fight should have never taken place. Now this is, one of my biggest pet peeves, that a lot of stuff comes out afterwards that we scratch our heads and say, how did we not know about this? Why didn't the fighter tell us? Why didn't the corner tell us? Why didn't somebody tell us that maybe we could have done something to avoid a catastrophe? So it says, the boxer died following a fight that should have never taken place. So not only are we going to be obviously very upset that one of our athletes died, but then this comes out. Next slide. So this is all the stuff that came out after that fight. So he was advised not to box 3 years before he died. And his partner was heartbroken, but stated that he was suffering from headaches weeks before the fight. And then he was sparring with a guy called Stuart Burt, and he stopped sparring because of headaches. Now, the corner says, I never paid attention to it, I didn't think it was important. We get this all of the time. Fortunately, it doesn't always end in a catastrophe, but sometimes it does, and it certainly makes all of us look bad. It looks like we're not doing our job. It looks like the doctors are incompetent, the commissions are incompetent, the sport is incompetent. Next slide. Now this was recent, you all know about this, and this has been all over the media, that, he obviously fractured his leg, a very bad fracture of the tibia and fibula, which is the lower leg, and unfortunately, you could see it on the right-hand side, how his leg basically snapped in half. Next slide. Now he comes out after the fight, what does he say? He had stress fractures. Now, stress fracture means little tiny abnormalities, irregularities in the bone. Okay, that's not going to cause this. But if we go to the next slide, he states, I was injured going into the fight. People were asking me, when was the leg broke? What point did the leg break? Ask Dana White, ask the UFC, ask Dr. Davidson, who's the UFC doctor, the head doctor. Stress fractures in my leg. Okay, this is not good, because again, this makes us look like we've ignored a pre-existing medical injury. I had multiple stress fractures of the shin bone, and I have trouble with my ankle anyway, and Mike Mazzulli knows this, what drives him probably crazier than it drives me, but both of us are at wit's end when this happens. Next slide. Now, of course, Nevada has to answer this, and they go, they're not aware of it. So now you have he said, she said, but in the end of the day, he breaks a leg because of something that was pre-existing, that perhaps could have been checked out a little bit more thorough. Next slide.
We know about the Pacquiao injury. So he fights, next slide, with a torn rotator cuff. And he had requested a cortisone shot right before the fight. First of all, that does nothing. Cortisone shots could take upwards of 3 weeks to really make a difference. If they were infusing lidocaine or different medications that could numb things, perhaps you don't feel the discomfort, but the shot would have made no difference here. Next slide. But this is the part that gets me a little crazy. We were not aware of this injury till 6:30 of the weigh-in, meaning the day before. But he puts here, the medication he was taking was disclosed on his medical questionnaire, but not the actual injury. Now, if you go back to what I was stating in my original talk, if somebody puts down they're on medicines, it's up to me as the ringside physician to say, why are you taking that? Oh, well, I hurt my shoulder. Now we start to get into a little bit more question and answer. What's going on with your shoulder? Then I'll go over to one of my commissioners and I'll say, hey, we have a little bit of an issue here, and we'll talk about it and we'll decide, okay, listen, you know, we might let the fight go forward, but we don't want you afterwards saying, oh, by the way, I had a bad shoulder, because by blaming it on, basically blaming the commission for allowing you to fight, and it comes out afterwards. Makes us all look terrible. Next slide. Jake Paul. This is an oldie but a goodie. Should say a recent but a goodie. Next slide. This is the statement he makes.
Hey Jay, a couple more questions for me. As you delve deeper into the sport, like the risk gets bigger, you're fighting Ben, who has real fight pedigree. I saw one of your videos, you had like a visit to the doctors to talk about the damage that you've received already. Are you worried about, as you take more risks, the effects you've experienced and what could come?
Yes and no. You know, it's a dangerous sport. And that's why when people question my dedication to it, it's like, I'm showing up every single day, I'm putting my mental health on the line, my brain is on the line. Like you said, I've gone and gotten brain scans and have early signs of CTE. But I love this sport and I wouldn't trade it for anything else. And I'm a fighter.
I have early signs of CTE. First of all, we can't diagnose CTE on MRI scans, but are you kidding me? Then that shows that we as commissioners are allowing somebody to get into a ring or a cage with known brain damage. Next slide. So this is basically what he said. You know, and his quote was, early signs of brain disease, CTE. I mean, this is crazy. Then, of course, he took a lot of heat, and then he writes this: I want to retract my comments I made about CTE as it relates to me in my medical history. It's a very serious condition. I should not have misspoken about it. But he did, and he spoke about it after the fight. Next slide. Now, this put George in a very difficult position. And, you know, our doctor signed off on his physical this morning. We did clear him based on the I mean, what is George supposed to do? I mean, it could have said you're not fighting, but this makes it very difficult for commissioners to deal with these after the fact, these red flags that we should be able to identify before. But unfortunately, these kids take to social media now and tell us about all their ailments. Next slide. Now, he's supposed to fight again August 29th. If he was coming to one of my 3 jurisdictions here, man, I'd be whacking him for tests. Who told you you have CTE? Who told you have brain damage? You know, who made that statement? You didn't make it up yourself. So I would be having MRIs, MRAs, neuropsych, neuroexam. I'd make sure. So I don't know what they're doing in Ohio, but obviously, if the statement was true, bouts shouldn't take place unless you do all of these things. So I don't think anybody's here from Ohio, but I hope that they take what he said more serious. Next slide. This is my good friend, Derek Anderson. I don't know how many of you saw this bout recently at Mohegan Sun. Next slide.
Derek Anderson via strike. You go.
So I stopped this fight because he didn't have a nose left. But after the fight, next slide, he takes to social media. I don't know if you could read this. Thank you, Bellator. Thank you, the real Scott Coker. Love to be back as soon as possible, but went to the hospital 4 times as I was having kidney problems my whole camp, and I could hardly train. I wanted to make this fight happen. I'll be back, so on and so forth. So when I asked him, and I asked everybody, and we have it on a form, did you have any injuries or any problems up to training for this fight? No. And I actually asked them, in addition to the reviewing the form, did you have any issues? No. And then he comes out with this statement. Next slide. So is Mike here? Did Mike step out? So anyway, you know, Mike got a hold of this, and he wrote, you know, when you falsify a pre-fight medical form, when they ask you about your health, that's a concern. And had it not been for Instagram, we would have never known he had this kidney issue. Next slide. So how do we discourage this behavior? How do you guys discourage it? Need to be decisive. When stuff comes out like this that is affecting the health and safety of our competitors, you need to take decisive action. You need to send a message to everybody else out there. So, you know, I had suspended him for, I think it was 3 months or 4 months for that, the nose, and then Mike suspended him for another 120 days for falsifying the medical. And this was all over the media that Mike took this action, and hopefully fighters will not, you know, lie to us in the future. Next slide. So what can you do? You could cancel the fight, hefty fines, long suspensions, reduction in future purses, lawsuits. Okay, next slide. So what we do to avoid these catastrophes, again, the simple thing is find them before they become catastrophes. So how do we do that? Next slide. Okay, so I'm sure most of you have seen that. That was from a recent UFC weigh-in. That happens. These fighters try to lose a lot of weight way too quick. What happens next is driving me absolutely crazy. Next slide. So here comes the doctor. Now, if that happened in any of my jurisdictions, there's no conversation. Fighter's done. The doctor does not do a blood pressure, does not listen to a heart or lungs, does nothing, zero, talks to her, and then waves, okay, let her, go ahead, weigh in again. The woman just passed out, all right? Even if it wasn't dehydration, what the hell happened? All right? I mean, you guys do weigh-ins all the time. How many times do you see that? That's pretty bad. So now they're talking about, you know, what to do. Should they, you know, get her to weigh in again, give her a second? So now you're going to see what happens.
Official weight 135.5 for Julia Soliarenko.
That didn't have to happen. If somebody passes out when you're weighing them in, get them out of there, okay? Don't do what that doctor did. I don't know who that doctor is. I don't care who that doctor is. If the doctor did a blood pressure, listen to heart and lungs, maybe did a neuro exam and said, okay, maybe we could make at least an argument that she could get back in the scale, which I still would have never done. But this doctor did nothing. And then, I don't know if you saw, when she fell down, she had another seizure. And that seizure was from hypotension, low blood pressure. Brain doesn't like that. So she passed out and then had a seizure. Fortunately, then the fight was subsequently canceled. But it should never happen that second time. Next slide. So remember this. This was a talk I gave a couple of years ago, and you can hear this probably tomorrow also. Just 1 to 2% of body weight will start to begin to affect performance. 3% could cause a lot of problems, including renal failure and problems with muscle filtration in the body and stroke and even death. And we saw that here. Next slide. So here's one we had not too long ago. This fighter was fighting at 145 pounds, and this was what we got, that they were 179. You know, not good, not acceptable. Next. And this is what these fighters do after the fight. They come out and state, pushed his body to the brink of death while cutting weight for a fight against Vitor Belfort that was scheduled to happen in January, but was canceled after Hall fainted on the way to the weigh-in. I mean, you know, these fighters will do what they need to get down to the weights they want to fight at. But this is bad stuff when they come out again after the weigh-in and state things like this. Next. Okay. Here's another recent example. Okay. Mickey writes, I gassed hard in there, had an adrenaline dump. I passed out during the weight cut, and my body shut down in the first round. I'm sorry to my friends and family and, you know, fans. Passed out, okay, during the weight cut. I'm guarantee that was not reported. Next slide.
I heard that you were really sick after the fight and both before the fight, and that you've been in the hospital this whole time. Is that true?
Yeah, I just got out yesterday. I'm still in Vegas, at a Vegas hotel now. Yeah, that was my first hospital stay. So yeah, I had my kidneys were failing.
Next slide. His kidneys were failing.
I was told, correct me if I'm wrong, that it was not a weight cut issue, that what you actually had was rhabdomyolysis, which a lot of CrossFit athletes get. It's essentially this process where the body turns on itself from overtraining, and you can get blood poisoning and all manner of different things. What did the doctors tell you had?
Yeah, I did have rhabdo, but they also think it was, you know, it was kind of like a perfect storm. I was like, you know, drops in the bucket that made it happen. Like I was like, my stomach was a little off for like 5 weeks. Like I had like some diarrhea when I was supposed to cut weight. I think I did the weight cut, and this weight cut was way easier than the last one. Like you know, I believe it's not just got to put the pain in and like get through the weight cut. But this one wasn't necessary. I was, you know, sitting and having a good time. I got the weight off. But at one point I did, when I stood up, I was passed out.
Okay, so he passed out. This obviously looks really bad after a fight because it looks like, again, we allowed them to do this. And the problem is the amateurs learn this from the pros, and they learn it while they're amateurs. And here was a case in 2017 where this was an amateur, and she died. She died from a weight cut and dehydration. Next slide. So why are we allowing this? Why do we still allow this? Some commissions, California, I know Mike over at Mohegan, are making drastic changes. When fighters make these statements after the fight, there needs to be consequences. Because if you don't do something, they're going to keep going, and it's going to lead, not just today. I mean, we're talking, while they're working, they're fighting in our little jurisdictions. 20 years from now, when their kidneys don't work and they have kidney failure, or it affects their brain from constant dehydration and getting hit, they may have CTE. We don't know yet, but I can tell you this isn't helping. Next slide. So the forms are important. This is one of our forms where we ask them the questions, and of course they're going to lie, but at the very least, if they answer questions honestly, we could then follow up with more questions, determine if there's an issue we have to be concerned about. Next slide. So examples of physical exam red flags. Next slide. So here's a person who's taken Latuda. This is used for bipolar, depression, and schizophrenia. And there is evidence that people who get hit in the head, who have bipolar and schizophrenia, it may result in worsening brain damage and worsening symptoms. So this is somebody who we required, because we were right up to fight time, we allowed her to fight, but we requested a letter from a psychiatrist saying that they did not think that this person was at higher risk to have long-term brain injury.
She did win the fight, though.
Yeah. And a matter of fact, it's not necessarily that it's going to affect their performance. These are just those little clues that makes you say, look, we want to protect you to the athlete. And by doing that, we're going to get somebody who's going to watch you a little bit more closely because you have this medical issue. Next. And we talked about this in part one of my talks where they left the blood pressure out. Next. Now here, this was signed by a nurse practitioner. Now, a lot of people say, well, what's the difference? They're able to do a physical. Physician assistants, they're able to do a physical. Why do we make that only doctors can do these exams? And the reason is there is a heck of a lot of difference in the education from a doctor to a nurse or a physician assistant. I went to medical school for 4 years. I did 4 years of residency. Most of these paraprofessionals do an extra 1 or 2 years, and they could do almost everything I could do. Next slide. So here's one of the reasons why. You probably can't see this, but this is a Q&A that they have in one of the states. And if you go down, have you ever had chest pains while exercising? The fighter wrote yes. Then if you go down 2 more, have you ever had wheezing or coughing while exercising? The fighter wrote yes. Then go down even further and you'll see that their blood pressure was 160/90, which is, it's elevated. It's up there. It's not dangerously elevated, but it's high. And then the pulse was, you can't read that, but 110. Now, if I check everybody's pulse and you're sitting here, you're going to probably be between 60 and 80. These were all red flags that the nurse did not pick up on. This fighter fought, this fighter died the next day. Died in the ring. Next slide. Okay, some of the examples of eye red flags. So this fighter had LASIK, and LASIK was a big issue with me and the commissions I work for, because I said, look, it could lead to blindness. We really should not allow LASIK. LASIK is the cutting of the cornea, the front of the eye. They open and they flap it open. Then they shoot a laser in it, then they put the cornea back on. The problem is, and I don't know if anybody's had LASIK here, it never heals. The flap could literally be pulled off 20 years later. Now, if that flap gets dislodged and you lose it, next slide, is you cannot see anymore. And either you're going to be blind for the rest of your life, or your only hope is a corneal transplant. And because part of the cornea is still there, it's not as simple as just putting a new cornea where your old flap was. And this was a study that was done, which basically showed that a person will be blind for a long time. Okay, so let's keep going. Here was another one recently we had, a really interesting one. I have never seen 2800. 2,800. Most of us are 20/20. If our eyes are kind of going, we wear glasses, we might be 20/40, 20/50, 20/80, maybe 2,100. 2,800 is legally blind. 2,400 is legally blind. But corrected, this fighter was 20/20. So what we did is we took a close chart, and the fighter was able to read it close, which allows us to permit the fighter to compete. The problem is when somebody is that abnormally long-eyed, so they can't see far away, there is evidence that that person is higher risk for retinal detachment. And just ironically, we stopped the fight because the fighter told me he couldn't see out of his right eye at all. I don't know if that was a poke or whatever, but you know, this is it may have come to fruition, so we're going to have him go back to his eye doctor and get checked. Next. Yeah, next again. Contact lenses. This is a fun one that Mike and I have a great story about. So some of you, I'm sure, allow contact lenses, and I always felt it was dangerous because of getting dislodged. You can't call a timeout in boxing or MMA to put a contact in. And we've had situations where, you know, people have lost contacts and it results in problems. But the next slide. But the interesting was, before this fight, Mike said to me, you know, Doc, I think for the fight after this, we're going to allow contacts. And that's right here, yeah. Yeah, and I said, okay, let's see what happens. Well, you know, God was kind of looking down that day, and all of a sudden, Shaka Moore, who's a real journeyman, went into, you could actually see me kind of just between the legs there. He went back to the ropes, covered up, and took, I don't know, 10, 12, 14 unanswered punches till the fight was stopped. And I went in quickly and I said, what's the matter? And he goes, my eye. I said, what's wrong with your eye? His contact lens had dislodged behind his eyeball, which, if your contact lens ever dislodged, it hurts like hell. It took us half an hour to get it out. But more importantly, he wasn't really defending himself for that 10 or 12 or 14 punches that he took. And then subsequent to that, we've had some MMA athletes where the contacts came out, and the first thing this person did was like this. Okay? Well, you know what's going to come next, one of these knees, but their opponent went like this. And then the referee comes over and goes like this. And I stood up, Mike remembers it, I started going, what the hell's going on? You know? And sure enough, she lost her contact and she didn't continue fighting, she was looking for it. And she could have got critically hurt. So we do not allow contact lenses. Next. Okay, so this is interesting. How do you know what an eye exam that you get is not an eye exam? When I made this form, the one thing I purposely put there was at the bottom, it says intraocular pressure. If you're not an eye doctor, you can't do this test. So when it's left blank, you know they didn't really go to an eye doctor. If you don't go to an eye doctor, they don't dilate your pupil. They don't dilate your pupil, they can't look for the early stages of detached retina. And as you know, if you detach your retina, and if they don't put it on immediately, you are blind for the rest of your life. Next. EKGs we talked a little bit about. This was one that was somewhat abnormal, and the doctor just wrote normal sinus rhythm. No other statements. So, of course, then it led to the whole conversation I had to have with one of my 3 commissioners that this is abnormal. I know the doctor wrote normal sinus rhythm, but that's only the rhythm. This person has indications that either they're a great athlete, which they probably were, or they had heart damage. Next slide. Same thing with this. As you see those things go down instead of up, could indicate there's a problem. Next. And this is even a bigger problem because you can see all these wide thingies going up and down. Those are all premature beats, and this could be that fighter, like a Hank Gathers, who dies in the ring or the cage. So we did not allow this person to compete. Next. And then some of the blood red flags, we've talked about this is all normal. That's what we're looking for. Next slide. This you may not be able to see, but this was the hepatitis C that was positive. So again, we do not let them fight. A lot of times you'll get, next slide, person will write, antibody came back reactive. However, you'll see that the levels are less than 1,000. Well, I'm not letting them fight because less than 1,000 could be 500. That person cuts, it goes into your eye. Next thing you know, you have hepatitis C. And by the way, that's one you got for the rest of your life. Yes, there's some new medicines that could treat this, but again, you get hepatitis C, it could lead to liver failure, something called cirrhosis, and what's called a hepatoma, which is liver cancer. Not a good thing to get. Next slide. And this is pretty common. This was a wrong hepatitis test. So again, if they go to the wrong doctors, the doctors don't know what we're looking for, it's the wrong test. CT MRI red flags. This is all you want to see, everybody. Negative MRI. Next slide. Once you start to see things like resolution of a hematoma, that means they bled in their brain, not a good thing. Next slide. When you see this much written under the impression, you better look at this, because this is not good that there's so much written here. Basically, without going into it, this person has some significant brain damage, irreversible brain damage. Next slide. So, how do we avoid catastrophes? How do we use these red flags to help us save lives? You carefully review them. You don't just order them and you say, great, EKG is here, MRI is here, blood test is here. You got to look at them. Look for missing information. Prevent the fighters from fighting if they have an abnormality until you do more research and more testing. And the commissions could share this information on BoxRec, and that's why I asked the question, because if we're suspending somebody for an abnormal MRI and the year is up, and then you are letting them fight without even contacting one of my 3 commissions to say, why did you do that? Why are they under indefinite suspension at Mohegan? Mike will tell you, because he's got a bad MRI. Next. Now, identify medical issues, disqualify competitors, disqualify the competitor who fails the pre-fight physical, and have competent doctors, okay? Ringside doctors, not mid-levels and not people who don't know what they're doing at a fight. Because there's lots of doctors who want to sit there and say, wow, I'm ringside, I'm cage side, this is so cool. They don't know what the hell they're looking for. Next. Job is safety first. I think we'll all agree. That's number 1. Number 1, number 2, number 3. We try to save lives, okay? But we also try to prevent long-term injuries or damage. Whether it's to the brain, whether it's to the eye, whether it's to the heart, whether it's to the kidneys. We got to change the old way of thinking that the fight must go on. Because the fight doesn't have to go on. Life has to go on. Next. Now, one of the last things I want to talk about is being prepared should some of those red flags occur in the ring. Next slide. Be prepared for all outcomes. We all need to work together. I speak to the referees. I speak to the inspectors. I give seminars fairly frequently to teach them what to look for. Okay? But unfortunately, bad things still can happen even if we're prepared. Next slide. I created this, and you're all welcome to use this. It is my pre-fight checklist. I meet with the paramedics. I discuss the fight with them. I notify the hospital. I meet with security to know our egress to get them out. I hand out physical forms. You know, you could just read this. I do all of these things. I get to the venue at least 2 hours before the fights start to make sure this is all covered. Unfortunately, wherever I work, it usually is me just kind of going through the formality, because I only have really 3 places or 4 that I work. But a lot of you who have shows all over the place, especially places like California, each place could be different. And the security and the EMTs are all different. I don't have that problem.
Evacuation plans. We meet with the ringside physicians and the paramedics, and we walk through the entire venue from ring to the dressing rooms, the route we're going to take if the fighter has to be evacuated. And we also let everyone know what hospital fighters will be routed to, and they have to give us if they do get evacuated, we have to have a point of contact to keep up with them while they're at the hospital as well.
That is exactly what you're supposed to do. So again, walk it through so when something happens, you're not saying, where's my paramedic? How do we get him out of here? You know, what hospital should we take him to? That stuff should all be done by your chief ringside physician. Next slide.
And Teddy has the fight plan for that fight, brought to you by Corona Extra.
Now you see, the ref didn't wait to 10. You see the inspector comes out with chair. You see how they're surrounding the fighter, not allowing anybody to interfere with us working. See, there's a cameraman at the top. Watch what the inspector does.
And you can see Dr. Michael Schwartz and Tony Alessi and Dr. Raj Kumar, one of the finest medical staffs in all of Ringside boxing, tending to Rudy Cisneros right away.
Now, you never want to see this, but we were prepared. The inspectors were prepared. The ref was prepared. The paramedics were prepared. We were able to get him out of there in under 2 minutes. Okay, next, final points. So only appoint qualified, experienced ringside, cage side physicians. Understand what to look for in boxing and MMA. Have a chief ringside physician. Work with your doctors. Review your regs and update them frequently. And attend boxing and MMA matches at places where there are other jurisdictions. So I've heard a lot of you say, you know, well, we don't have big shows. Well, you know what? Once we get up and running, I'm sure any of our commissioners would invite you to come to our show and see, get another perspective of what we do. Next. When a fighter takes to the media to air their dirty laundry, okay, it makes us look incompetent. Don't let it continue. Take action. They gotta understand they can't just say things without repercussions. Next. Read social media. I hate to say that, but go on Twitter. Go on, you know, Instagram, because that's where you're gonna find this stuff. Create good documents. Allow your physicians to request more information. Don't be afraid to ask more questions. And follow through with your threats. If you tell them you're going to suspend them or fine them, do it. And that's it. Questions?
I have a couple of points.
What's it?
You mentioned, you brought up like a culture type of thing about the fight must go on. Did everybody, we just saw the video about that weigh-in where the girl passed out. Did you guys, to be honest, did you guys see the reaction of the people that immediately went to her side? What did they try to do with her? Wow. They tried to stand her up. I can guarantee you that that's not promotion, those are her seconds. We're in a scenario where this fight must go on thing has to change. It has to change. We have to take action as regulators to say to ourselves, at some point, we have to protect the fighter from themselves. They're always going to do it. You have old school trainers. I had kids that come in, they weigh 155, and he's like, oh, I'm going to fight at 125. What? Why would you do that? You know, you explain the situation to them. We've had scenarios, and the thing that Doc talks about with the social media and the stuff that happens after with the medicals, this will happen to every single one of you regulators in this room at one point in time. Doc and I's last fight. We're both standing ringside, end of the main event. Everything's great. We're cleaning up our paperwork, and Bruce Bryan decides to tell everyone on the broadcast on UFC Fight Pass that he tore his ACL a week before the fight. Unbeknownst to us, because he didn't mention anything like that to us. So I did a very similar thing that Mike does, is you come down hard with a suspension. Doc gave him 90 days for something, and I threw another 120 on him for lying to the commission. So this stuff will happen. It's going to constantly happen with you guys, and for you guys in the room. Don't doubt that it will, because it will. But that culture thing is another conversation I want to have later on in the week. So, thank you very much, Doc.
Okay. Thank you.
We have one more thing to take care of, and that's the declaration of candidates. It's a voting year, so we're going to have Lydia Robinson come on up. And as she walks up, I'd like to have everybody give her a round of applause because without this Lydia, this does not happen. The amount of things that our board administrator takes care of on a regular basis is unbelievable, so we are super thankful of that.
It does take a village.
Mm-hmm.
John English and Mark Langlands and Bryan Dunn have been a big help.
Oh, you need this here.
Oh, am I?
Oh, yeah, that's why you're here.
Oh.
I figured you would do it instead of one of us.
Would you rather hear jokes or nomination?
We did the jokes already.
I haven't done the jokes.
We did the jokes in Mohegan, remember?
Well, I might have some new ones. But then again, maybe not. Same ex-husbands. I haven't been married since. The first nomination is for president. Yes, Greg.
I mean, this is difficult, but I'd spoken to Bryan and Lambert. I would like just to the body to not have elections at this time. There's a lot of people missing. A lot of people couldn't attend. We did it back in '92, when we just didn't have a lot of people here. We kind of just waited for a little while. We had a convention just for voting rights. We did it in December of the same year. We just don't have a good representation here. And I don't think it's wise to hold elections. And I would just like to have some discussion of why we just can't postpone until December, when I think we'll have close to 100%.
Greg, question on that. What's happening in December? Because my state's not going to pay for me to come back.
You know, Ronnie, it's just something that I just picked December because that's what we did. That's what we did 15 years ago when we kind of ran into this situation. You know, in December we went down to the south to a nice state, get out of the cold. And even if we have to do it by video conference for that one time, it's just, I don't feel we have a lot of the members here to hold an election. That's my own personal opinion. I'd like to hold off. I don't think it hurts anything. We'll still have the same people running the organization. And I think we can have a more representative look at the Senate.
Let's see what the numbers are that are present, that are voting members, and the people that are members that are in good standing. And what's the, I guess.
To answer Mike's question, we currently have 52 commissions that are in good standing, meaning that they paid their dues for the year. Currently at this convention, we have 27 commission voting parties present.
Now, I just want to remember, too, that last year we decided that if you have not paid your dues for 2 years, you're not considered a voting member the following year until your dues are paid. There's a better reason for that. And it's black and white.
Oh, there it is.
So that's where I am. I mean, it's the decision of the body, but I think we have the quorum here. I don't even think we need quorum, because quorum defined in the bylaws are different than what people think it is. But we do have a quorum here for a vote this year.
My count of members is a little bit different than Mark's. I come up with 51 qualified members.
Oh, I didn't count Mississippi because we were already.
Yeah, so it's 51, and there are 27 voting members here.
We have Zoom capability now. Why can't we get some of these people on the Zoom call for tomorrow and let them cast a vote? Let me do it tomorrow or December. What's the difference?
The bylaws say that you must be present at the meeting.
We tried to do Zoom 15 years ago. Not Zoom back then.
Skype.
Yeah, we tried to do Skype 15 years ago. Just to get everybody there, we couldn't make the meetings. And what happened is, everybody was Skyping. It cost money to run these meetings, and no one was coming. And, you know, it was a catch-22. We were losing money doing the conventions because no one was coming because they could go by Skype and not by Zoom. That's why we force you to come here, that you have to be here. This is, you know, it makes money for the organization. It costs money to run this place. I know. It costs money. So that's why we say in person. I'm just asking that the election, there's no compelling reason to have an election right now. There isn't. It's nothing that can be held off for a little while when we get a number of the states back in. The New Yorks and Texas, New Jersey, Ohio. We need all them states and commissions to come back in. Then we can have an election. Let the rest of them do.
They have to pay their dues. They have to pay their dues.
Greg, it's worth noting that New Jersey was not in Scottsdale. A lot of members that could have been present were not, and before COVID, so.
I'm not arguing that point. It's not fair for the people that are here to hold up an election because other people didn't come. There's people that came here from all over the place.
Long before we ever came. Now the rules are the rules. The states, tribes, if they're not here, there's a reason they're not here. And they could be because of the pandemic. Because I understand before I left, I found out Florida was a hot spot here. So I was wondering how I'm going to explain this to my tribe when I get back. But I had both of my shots, so I'm, you know, sort of clear with that. But to me, this organization is a great organization. And I look at this as, you know, these are tops. If states can't be here, if the tribes can't be here, you know, they knew this was election year. They should have been here. Or they should have called and said, you know, why don't we do this voting by Zoom? Or, you know, technology has changed things. There's no reason that we should wait 6 months down the road to vote. They should have been.
I just wanted to ask a quick question. Is there anything in the bylaws of the ABC that would govern when an officer election can take place, or how many members have to be present for that? Is there an issue with people's terms effectively being extended if that's not the case? I'm just first year here. I'd like for someone to speak to that, please.
The bylaws were changed about 6 years ago to make it a 2-year term. So the bylaws specify a 2-year term. There were no provisions made for COVID. I'm pretty impressed with what, you know, oh, I'm so sorry, thank you, with what Haskell said. if there had been notification, I mean, this conference has been set the last week of July for decades. Had there been people who had paid their dues and wanted to make arrangements, and they had done that in advance, that could have been addressed. But Greg, I didn't hear from you, not that you had to call me, but you know, you mentioned New Jersey, they haven't paid their dues.
Yeah, I know. I'm not going to defend anybody that's not here. That's not my role. That's not my role. I was here from day one when we started this group. Pennsylvania has put in more money into the ABC than any other commission, bar none. That's a fact, bar none. It's just, we gotta have a bigger representation. We have to have it. At some point, we gotta have a big representation. We don't have that. But that brings up a legitimate point. Yeah, that's here. That's a legitimate point. I'm not gonna argue about that. But the commissions that I talked to, just like last year when the rules, the commissions that I talked to, all of them gave me my word. Hey, hold off, we're going to be there, we're going to pay our dues, we want to get back, it's got to be 100%. We got a shot to bring it all back together, but I'm not going to argue with what you just said, Lily.
Andy Foster on Zoom would like to unmute and address the body.
I'm Ms. Lydia, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Look, I mean, my view is that the members present should vote. That's my view. And my view comes from section 3.4 of the Constitution. It says the presence of a majority of those delegates entitled to vote shall constitute a quorum at a meeting. When you look at that particular section, you go back to the voting delegates. What that says in section 3.2, each member shall have one voting delegate. But there's another sentence that's more important. The voting delegate must be present at the meeting at the ABC conference. So, in order to vote. So, when you take 3.4 and you look at it with 3.2, to me that means that the folks that are at the conference should be able to cast a vote for the next election. And I won't go into the specifics, but if you go down and look at that 2-year term, my concern is that if you guys don't vote, we're not going to have a president, which is an important piece of the whole ABC puzzle. Now listen, I don't know, I understand what the way for Nick and the guys, but they weren't there last time, and you know, look, nobody else wants that job. Let's not do it again. Who wants to do that job? You just land what you can land. So I'm all for Mike doing it again if he will do it again.
Thank you, Andy.
Are you sure that was Andy?
Absolutely.
We need voice recognition.
I'm rolling. Is there any other discussion?
As a smaller Indian commission on Lake Haskell, I mean, it was a budgetary consideration for our commission as to whether or not I was coming this year, between COVID and the casino being a lot slower, and it was basically based on the fact that it was an election year. So for those of us who did think about it ahead of time and make the decision to show up, I think it would be disrespectful to put it off for us.
Okay, we've had a discussion. Do we have any nominations? Yes, Mr.
Mark Langlis from Connecticut nominates Mike Mazzulli for president.
Time out. I really need you
Whoa.
to do your nomination into the microphone for the people on Zoom.
Oh.
Thank you.
Mark Langlis from Connecticut nominates Mike Mazzulli as president of the ABC.
Who's second?
Frank Gentile from Miccosukee seconds that motion. This is to accept Mike as a candidate. Are there any other nominations? Are there any other nominations? I can't see much point in delaying this. Is there an acclamation?
Aye.
All by acclamation say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say no. Mr. Mazzulli? Let me tell you, I've now worked with 2 presidents. Bryan is easier to work with. But they are both really special people. And you may define special however you like. I love them both. There are 2 vice presidential positions. Are there nominations? Or do we have any declarations of people that would like to run or nominations?
Nominate Mark Langlis.
New Hampshire's John English nominates Mark Langlis, who currently serves as 2nd Vice President. Are you nominating him for 1st or 2nd Vice President? You're nominating Mark Langlis from Connecticut as 1st Vice President. Are there any other nominations for 1st Vice President? Is there a second for Mark Langlis as 1st Vice President?
I second.
Tricia seconds the nomination for Mark Langlis as 1st Vice President. Are there any other nominations for 1st Vice President? All in favor by acclamation, say aye. All opposed say no. That carries by total acclamation. The next position is for 2nd Vice President. Do we have a nomination? Mr. Mazzulli.
Scott Bowler from Utah, please.
Mr. Mazzulli nominates Scott Bowler from Utah.
As long as he wants to work.
He looks like he wants to work.
I'll second that.
And Bryan Dunn seconds Scott Bowler from Utah. Are there any other nominations for 2nd Vice President? Any other nominations? Once again, all in favor of acclamation for Scott Bowler as 2nd Vice President? All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Scott Bowler will now be the ABC's 2nd Vice President. We currently have 1 person serving as Secretary Treasurer. Trista Robichon could not continue as Treasurer, although I need to tell you that Miss Oregon USA got the ABC an account with U.S. Bank, a national bank. Something I could not do because the ABC did not have a tax ID number and was not a 501c3. And I neglected to do it while I was treasurer. And Trista, you did it. Then I was able to just walk down the street, present everything, a valid tax ID number, our tax returns, our 501c3 certification, and now we have an account at Bank of America. Ta-da! We are no longer using the Bank of Little Rock except where we have a CD. And that's because I haven't bothered to change it. Allison Tully was willing to take over both roles of Secretary Treasurer. There is...
It's not easy either, so thank you very much.
Yes. Yes. So there is no provision in the ABC bylaws for a joint position except to serve out a term. So that was legal for Allison to do that. What do we want to do? Do we have a nomination for secretary? Is Greg talking to us from the vestibule? Do we have a nomination from the floor for secretary? Yes, Mike?
Stowalter from Minnesota for secretary.
Second.
Matt?
Over here.
Where? Oh. Is that agreeable to you?
Sure.
Great. Okay. Any other nominations? All right. All in favor by acclamation as for Matt Showalter as Secretary of the ABC?
Aye.
All opposed? Matt Showalter will serve out the next term as the Secretary. And Treasurer for the ABC. I'm not allowed to nominate.
I'm going to nominate Allison as quick as possible.
I will make an endorsement. And Scott Bowler from Utah seconds that nomination. Any other nominations for treasurer? A thankless, hard, time-consuming job.
She's working right through it. Look at that.
Well, she's playing secretary now. Any other nominations for treasurer? Everybody's crickets out there. All in favor of Allison by acclamation?
Aye.
All opposed? Well, that pretty much takes care of that agenda item. You have a tremendous slate of officers for the next 2 years. And I want you all to just think about something. 2 years is just about enough time to get your feet wet, not counting COVID. Bryan, what do you think about that?
What's that?
2 years.
Checked out, he's not president.
He said, I'm done, stick a fork in me. 2 years is a short term. Just think about 3 years. I have nothing to do with the bylaws. I'm not a voting member. I'm just a mouth and a